There's a well-preserved farmhouse in the town of Stoughton, Massachusetts, located on the corner of Pleasant and Pine Street, just down the road from the town center. At first glance, the Capen-Reynolds Farm, built mostly in the mid-19th century, doesn't appear to be significant. What many don't realize is that in the 19th and 20th centuries, this inconspicuous house was home to some of the most remarkable women to ever live in Stoughton. One of these women was Bessie Capen. As one of the first women to be admitted into MIT, she was a pioneer in women's education. She was an independent businesswoman and a dedicated philanthropist. She left behind a robust portfolio of photographs in an era when few women used cameras. In this program, we're going to explore the world in which Bessie lived in and what sort of challenges she faced as a woman making her way in what was traditionally a man's world. This is the story of Stoughton's own Bessie Capen. Bessie Capen was born in 1838 in Stoughton, Massachusetts. She was a member of the prominent but humble Capen family who settled in Massachusetts back in 1633. In the 18th century, the Capens were instrumental in the development of Stoughton as landowners, educators, and community leaders.
The Capens were part of the government of the town. They were members of the old Stoughton Musical Society. They were, individuals that had town offices. I mean, they were merchants, they were farmers, they had educators. So they're part of the fabric of the community.
The Capens had the benefit of, since they came to Stoughton early, they owned a lot of land. They were given a lot of land, especially up in North Stoughton. That's where we have the Capen-Reynolds Farm.
Bessie's father, Adam Capen, was a farmer, cobbler, and educator, purportedly forming the first grammar class in Stoughton. Despite the prominence of the family, it would be a mistake to believe Bessie came from wealth, even by the standards of the day.
They weren't poor, but I don't think they had a whole lot of ready cash. Certainly they had more available funds than a recent immigrant.
In 1842, at just 4 years old, Bessie began her education, enrolling in the old hotel schoolhouse in Stoughton, at a time when attending school was not compulsory in Massachusetts. By the age of 13, she had set up her own school, operating out of the family shoe shop at the Capen farmhouse. This was just the start of what would be a lifelong fascination with teaching. Historically, it was still an oppressive time for women. In the mid-1800s, career opportunities for women were limited. By 1860, only 15% of women in the United States worked outside of the home.
Because it was in the 19th century, women didn't have the right to vote. Women were still, after the American Revolution, second-class citizens.
You're either going to go out and you're going to get married and raise a family and be a housewife and a mother, or you're going to work at a factory. There wasn't a lot of higher education, because for higher education, you might have got enough education to become the grade school teacher in town.
Beyond Stoughton, the entire country was undergoing a revolution in technology and a vast expansion of industry. As the country grew, so did opportunities for men and women.
If you think about the sweep of the 19th century in the United States, this is a time when our nation shifts from being a small, rural, agricultural economy into a much larger urban industrial economy. And along that span of that century, we invent professions. That rise of that professional class meant that education was really important. And in the American context, public education really becomes increasingly more important through the 19th century, that an educated workforce was considered a more capable, more valuable workforce, and it gave more opportunities for the citizenry to earn a living.
Higher education was mostly for those who were well off. There were no student loans or scholarships to rely on. Fortunately for Bessie, her older half-brother paid for her to attend Bridgewater Normal School, an institution especially designed to train teachers.
Well, obviously she was supported by her own brother, the idea that she had the gift and opportunity to, excel at this, that it must have been very self-empowering for her.
Although the family was not that wealthy, they managed to send her to these schools. They must have recognized that she wanted to learn, how eager she was in her potential, and supported her. If he had not had the vision to send her to school plus the money to pay for it, two important things, she would have maybe not been able to go, even if she wanted to go so much.
If you think about all the amazing things that women were doing in the 19th century, part of that is they had the support of their family, their friends around them that says, you go, girl, you do it. In the case of Bessie, think about her family supporting her, how important that must have been.
It was a privilege. It was a privilege to have the opportunity to get educated in languages and science and math.
Bessie graduated from Bridgewater in 1857. Her brother's investments paid off, and before long, Bessie accepted a teaching position at the Shepherd School in Cambridge, where she remained for 7 years. Her annual salary was $300, a remarkable sum for a woman in a time where the average salary for American workers was $200 a year. It was during this time that Bessie became engaged to a fellow Shepherd School teacher, Wallace Ahira Putnam. In 1864, while serving as a major in the Union Army, Putnam was shot in the head during a battle in Virginia. Mortally wounded, Putnam was able to survive long enough to make his way back to Stoughton, where he died. It's likely that he died in the Capen-Reynolds house.
Well, this photo is in the Stoughton collection because we received the papers and the photographs and the ephemera from the Capen-Reynolds house. So this picture was in North Stoughton at that house. This is probably a picture that belonged to Bessie. A good-looking young man of 26 when he died, unfortunately.
Bessie was devastated. Her niece would later write that for the rest of Bessie's life, rarely would she speak of the great sorrow, and only to her most intimate friends. Bessie lived the rest of her days unmarried, devoting herself instead to her work.
She was engaged to him. What would have happened to Bessie if they got married?
Despite the tragedy, Bessie steadfastly continued her career. She could have stayed at the Shepherd School with her comfortable salary, but she was destined for greater things. In 1868, she secured the prestigious position of professor of chemistry at the Girls' High School in Boston. Founded in 1852, the Girls' High School was the first public high school for young women in the United States.
When there was a plan to open up a public high school in Boston that would admit girls, the opening of the school was delayed and delayed because so many families wanted to enroll their daughters that they could just not accommodate them. But the curriculum for boys and girls in Boston or Massachusetts at those schools was the same. It was a classical curriculum that included even languages and sciences for both, even for the girls.
Also around this time, Bessie used her own money to send her 17-year-old niece, Mary L.B. Capen, to the Bridgewater Normal School. Having lived in the same home for many years, it's very likely that Mary was inspired by Bessie to follow in her footsteps. Bessie's support of Mary was the beginning of a lifelong tradition of using her own wealth to finance women's education. Despite her vast experience and training, Bessie still sought to improve her resume. So, in the early 1870s, she took the ambitious step of applying to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
The special things about MIT at that time was that they were one of the only, if not the only, university who was doing hands-on laboratory research. That was like totally cutting-edge, new, method of teaching.
A woman applying to MIT was unusual, but not totally unprecedented. In 1870, the institution had, with some opposition, admitted Ellen Swallow as a special student of chemistry. The MIT committee which voted to admit Ellen Swallow was careful to state, her admission did not establish a precedent for the general admission of females.
MIT was never a male-only school. They just didn't admit women.
This question of should women be scientists or engineers, could they be scientists or engineers, was very much unresolved. And in American society, there was a pretty profound bias that women biologically were incapable of being scientists or engineers.
There was this genuine belief that women were biologically different. They were weaker, they were more frail, their minds maybe didn't have as much blood in them because their blood was busy going to their reproductive organs. There were these concerns that a woman would be desexed if she was educated in the way that a man was. Her physicality might change, her mind could break, she could develop hysteria, she could become barren. These were serious medical scientific concerns that educated men had at the time.
Bessie Capen likely first became acquainted with Ellen Swallow at the Women's Education Association, founded in 1872.
They went to Europe together to explore and get tours of different chemistry laboratories, which does lead me to think that she probably was associated with MIT earlier than her official enrollment.
In 1873, Bessie took her chance and applied to enroll at MIT. Several sources state that after some debate, Bessie was, quote, rather begrudgingly admitted into the chemistry department, with the statement that a Miss Swallow had been allowed to enter, and if they must have one woman about, they might as well have two. Evidence strongly suggests that Bessie Capen was the second woman to ever be admitted into MIT. Before long, there were about a dozen female special students.
So the special students were often people who may have practiced in a field. So a portion of your special students were, in a sense, aspirational for the regular students, and a portion of them were practicing in a field.
In 1876, a special lab, the so-called Women's Laboratory, was set up specifically for the female students to use for an advanced chemistry program.
Bessie was one of, if not the first, financial supporter for the lab. We have her as a sponsor, donating money to buying the equipment.
As a special student, Bessie Capen and the other female students would independently conduct chemistry experiments in their segregated laboratory. Surviving record suggests that she took classes on botany, chemistry, quantum reasoning, and mineralogy, in addition to independent hands-on experiments.
It was independent study, basically. Each woman in the lab was doing her own specific research that was based on whatever their interest was.
It's important to just know is that this was an advanced postgraduate degree to pursue this kind of education. So if you took a year or two of chemistry or architecture, you were felt to have had a significant amount of training.
At the time, the admittance of small numbers of women into science programs was seen more as a quirky experiment rather than a groundbreaking step for women's rights. Over half of the original 14 women accepted into MIT as special students would go on to be pioneers in science and education. While a student at MIT, Bessie continued to work as professor of chemistry at the Girls' High School in Boston. By the 1870s, schools throughout the country were making efforts to foster practical skills for women with pragmatic hands-on studying. Bessie was tasked with developing a photography course for the girls' high school. In the summer of 1873, Bessie, with Mary as her assistant, went to work, taking photos around their hometown of Stoughton. They did this to practice their skills and raise money for class materials by selling photos. Consequently, they left behind a unique photographic record of Stoughton in the 1870s.
We have many, many photographs taken by them, including probably about 30 stereoscope negatives on glass.
Maureen and David Healy are modern-day photographers that use the same old-fashioned photographic process that Bessie would have used in that summer.
3, 2, 1. With wet plate, you have to be really thoughtful and methodical about each step in the process because you only have one chance to get that picture right. I mean, you can obviously take the picture again, but it's not like you can do it instantaneously. There's 15, 20 minutes between each photo before you can shoot again.
When things go right, it looks easy, but there's so much maintenance that you have to do with the silver bath. There's so many things that can go wrong.
Over the summer of 1873, the two women took pictures of nearly all the inhabitants of Stoughton, selling their photos for 15 cents each.
They knew what they were doing. You had to use chemicals, and you had to know everything that went into taking that and developing that photograph. It's quite an accomplishment.
The challenges I think she would have had would be the lighting she would have had to deal with in the time of the year as far as heat would be concerned with her chemicals, being that she was doing everything outside. She wouldn't have access to water, so she would have had to have brought her water. She would have had to have coat her glass plates in albumin, which would have kept the images from peeling. She would have had to do all this prior to her even setting out.
Her having a chemistry background, obviously, to her advantage for understanding how these chemicals work together, the toxicity of some of the chemicals that she was working with and how to handle them properly. Motion is certainly a huge limitation, right? You can't have any movement whatsoever. So that would have been the first thing. Certainly motion images or action photos are things that would have been outside the boundaries of what could have been done.
Bessie outfitted her father's old milk wagon as a mobile dark room. Amazingly, this historic artifact has survived to the present day, housed in the barn on the Capen-Reynolds property in Stoughton. Thanks to modern technology, the original glass plates can be scanned to show us the photos Bessie took in high-quality, full resolution.
The photo of the pond in West Stoughton, in the rural aspect of the Gaze cotton mill. When I saw that, I was saying, my God, that is so clear. You think that is a photo from the 1870s of a Stoughton that no longer exists. That is something that to be cherished.
She would have had to be incredibly driven, just based on that landscape photo being that she would have had to have gone out, lugged all that equipment out into a field in the middle of nowhere to get that photograph. You could tell that she had an artistic flair for this.
Back at MIT, the women's lab continued to grow. The original 14 female students had by the late 1870s ballooned to over 100 students. In 1884, female and male students were finally integrated, and no longer would they study sciences separate from each other. Although the enrollment of women has gone up and down since, today, the the demographics of men and women attending MIT are nearly equal. Bessie Capen completed her education at MIT in 1878. In 1875, she left the girls' high school to accept a position of head of the chemistry department at the newly founded Wellesley College. It was in this position that she met Mary A. Burnham, who was head of the English department. Bessie Capen and Mary Burnham would become great friends, and years later, business partners in what would be one of Bessie's greatest accomplishments. Bessie left Wellesley to accept a position at the institution she would come to be most associated with, Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. Bessie was one of the first professors at Smith College and is credited with founding the chemistry department there, remaining as the head of the department for 3 years. It was Mary Burnham who, while teaching together with Bessie at Wellesley, had first shared her desire of founding a prep school for girls. At the time, there was a lack of institutions designed to properly train girls for a college education. While at the time Bessie expressed no interest in running a private school, she still invested $800 into the venture. In September of 1877, the Classical School for Girls opened its doors for the first time. Although the original student body was tiny, the school quickly grew. In 1880, Bessie left her position at Smith College to focus on developing the school. By 1884, Mary Burnham's health was failing. Bessie followed her wishes to take over the school as principal. The school would later be renamed Northampton School for Girls, and finally, in 1909, the school was given its final name, Miss Capen's School for Girls. For the next 36 years, Bessie shaped the school in the image of what she imagined proper education should be. Under Bessie's leadership, Miss Capen's School for Girls flourished.
You got to give her the credit that she started a school for girls out there in Northampton, which became part of Smith College. That's quite an achievement.
Miss Capen's School for Girls developed its own identity. They had their own anthem, flags, pins, buttons, and campus culture. Friendly rivalry existed between different dormitories. Punishments were abolished, freedom and independence encouraged to a high degree, and girls were motivated to learn how to properly manage their time on their own. Bessie's unique policies likely stemmed from her own educational experiences growing up, where she may have felt overwhelmed by strict supervision and lack of freedom because of her sex. At Bessie's school, education was made more comfortable and less restrictive for women. As proprietor of the school, Bessie oversaw a vast expansion of the property. By 1900, the school accommodated 130 boarding scholars. Buildings built by Bessie included a gymnasium and an infirmary. Many of these buildings were incorporated into Smith College following Bessie's death and still stand today. In 1920, after 35 years of running the school, Bessie's health visibly failed, and she died shortly after. In her will, she bequeathed the campus of Capen School for Girls to Smith College, with whom the school was so closely associated with. Today, efforts are being made to restore the house in which Bessie Capen taught and grew up in. The Friends of the Capen-Reynolds Farm, a nonprofit dedicated to preserving the structure, work tirelessly in raising funds to keep the house standing.
The generations of the same family that passed through and lived in there, it was always descendants of the Capens.
Bessie was clearly an extraordinary, intelligent, and accomplished woman. But what exactly is Bessie's legacy?
I see people like Bessie and like her counterparts at MIT as being incredible visionaries for the world we know today.
It's almost a little bit like she was like a women's education leader.
I think her contributions to feminism, really, to empowering women and to letting women realize that, you can do anything that you want to do.
But what makes Bessie most fascinating as a historical figure is just how many women she financially supported. She used her own money to give her niece Mary Capen an education, and later secured her positions working alongside her at schools. In addition to Mary, Bessie also supported and mentored Mary's daughter, Bertha Capen-Reynolds. Bertha Reynolds became a celebrated and influential social worker and is probably the most accomplished and well-known woman to have grown up in Stoughton. It's safe to say that Mary and Bertha both owed their careers to Bessie Capen. But that's not all. According to Mary, writing in the years following Bessie's death, she financially supported the education of at least 50 girls outside the immediate family, though there were probably more.
She clearly looks like she was on a mission that she wanted girls to attend college. And then she personally helped all these individual young women in her family and friend circle and beyond. It really looks like Bessie had a major personal investment in that.
Bessie was clearly determined to make those opportunities available to anyone who was ambitious enough to ask.
She was committed to using her extra money to really further educational opportunities for women, sort of no matter where she went.
She helped out so many other young women and gave them the opportunity to succeed.
It didn't necessarily seem like she was maybe interested in her legacy. It was making better lives for how, Lord knows how many women.
The trickle down of all of those that she educated, and what did they do in turn? And did they take that same generosity and mentorship and teaching and influence countless others? Bessie is obviously a diamond in the rough that the town has forgot about.
Certainly for the small town of Stoughton, Massachusetts, Bessie Capen is a special historical figure worthy of more recognition. For now, the house in which she grew up and where she first started teaching all those years ago will stand as a testament to her and all she accomplished.